While hiking through the dense forest near her home, Laura stumbled upon an old, rusted vehicle half hidden by overgrown bushes. She held her breath as she approached it and wondered how it had ended up in such a remote spot, far from any roads or trails. With trembling hands, she pulled open the creaky door, only to be met with a sight that made her stomach churn. For a moment, Laura felt like she couldn't breathe, and then she let out the most blood-curdling scream ever. She took a step back from the car, but her foot got stuck under the root of a tree, and she fell. Completely panicking, she quickly stood up and ran back into the deep forest. She wanted to get far away from that car as soon as possible. A while later, she stopped for a moment to catch her breath. She had run faster than ever and hadn't looked back once, but now she realized her mistake. She checked each of her pockets, desperately wanting to call the police about her discovery. But her phone was gone. She must have lost it when she stumbled back by the car. Laura turned pale as she realized she needed to go back. She had no choice. Back at the car, she couldn't help but look inside it just once more. But then she completely froze in fear. You see, just before, when she had looked inside the car, there was a skeleton inside it, a human skeleton. And now, as if it wasn't scary enough already, it was gone. But whose skeleton was that? How did it end up in the car in the first place? And how could it suddenly have disappeared? Oh no. No, 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 Laura whispered, trying to keep herself from screaming at the top of her lungs. She hadn't thought that this nightmare could get any worse, but it just did. Whatever was going on here, she knew that she wasn't alone in these woods, and she could very well be in danger. She had so many questions, but she was sure of one thing. She needed to get away from there, right now. She frantically dialed 911, but her call wouldn't go through. Shit, she yelled under her breath, as she saw that she had no signal there. She looked around and kept her ears pointed, ready to run as soon as she heard any noise. The whole time, she couldn't stop thinking about what kind of person would move a skeleton. And why on earth would anyone do such a thing? Laura was just about to leave and go search for a spot where her phone had a signal when she thought of something. This car was hidden so deep inside the forest that it would be difficult to track down, even for the police. So it would probably be useful if she had any photos to show them, right? Taking a deep breath to calm herself down, she took some pictures of her surroundings as well as the car. She got as close to the vehicle as she dared, and took as many photos as she could without touching anything. The whole time, she heard no other sounds except for her own breathing and the rustling of leaves as she moved her feet around. And quite frankly, she was terrified. Suddenly, she noticed a piece of paper on the floor inside the car, and after thinking about it for a moment, she picked it up. Perhaps this would contain some useful information about the owner, or maybe that skeleton. She held her breath as she carefully unfolded it and gasped when she finally saw what it was. She hadn't expected anything like this. On the paper seemed to be some kind of map. Laura's eyes widened as she looked at it and tried to understand it. But no matter how long she stared at it, she became none the wiser. She decided not to waste any time on it and just leave. She didn't want to spend another second near this car if she didn't need to. As Laura walked through the woods, she kept checking her phone to see if she had any signal yet. She also had no idea if she was walking in the right direction, but she was just following a path. At some point, she thought she heard a noise behind her, but when she stopped to listen, it remained silent. Eventually, she told herself, "It's probably just a little animal, nothing to worry about." But she wasn't even sure if she really believed that. Laura's heart pounded as she finally saw the bars appear on her phone. She immediately dialed 911, her fingers shaking. "There's an old car in the woods with a skeleton inside," she gasped, trying to keep her voice steady. The dispatcher asked her location, and Laura quickly explained where she was and what she had found. "Please, hurry," she added, her voice trembling with urgency. The dispatcher listened carefully to Laura's account, asking her for details about the car and its exact location. After she finished, they told her to come to the station. "It's safer to discuss this in person," they said firmly. Laura felt a mix of frustration and relief. "All right, I'll head there now," she replied, glancing around nervously before starting her trek back to civilization. Disappointed by their response but understanding their caution, Laura agreed to visit the station. She began her journey back through the dense forest, trying to stay calm. Every rustle of leaves made her jump. "Just get to the station," she muttered to herself, focusing on putting one foot in front of the other. The walk seemed endless, each step taking her closer to safety. By evening, Laura finally reached the police station, exhausted and anxious. She took a deep breath before entering, hoping for immediate action. The fluorescent lights inside felt harsh after the dim forest. She approached the front desk, her heart still racing. "I'm here to report something I found in the woods," she said, her voice trembling slightly. The receptionist looked up, surprised by her disheveled appearance. After checking in, Laura sat in the lobby, her mind racing. She felt a mix of frustration and fear, the events of the day playing over and over in her head. Every passing minute felt like an eternity. She glanced at the clock, tapping her foot impatiently. The buzz of conversation around her seemed distant. "Please let this be over soon," she thought, wishing for some resolution. Laura was led to a small room where two officers waited. "Can you tell us everything you saw in the woods?" one asked, pen ready. Laura took a deep breath and began. "I was hiking when I found an old car hidden by bushes. When I opened the door, I saw a skeleton inside." The officers exchanged glances, scribbling notes as she recounted the terrifying details. Laura pulled out her phone, showing the officers the photos she had taken. "Here's the car and its surroundings," she said, swiping through the images. She then handed over the map she found inside. "This was on the floor," she added. The officers examined the pictures and the map closely, discussing what they saw. Laura watched them, hoping they could make sense of it all. The officers studied the photos and the map, their faces serious. "This map is strange," one said, tracing a path with his finger. "We need to figure out what it leads to." They continued to discuss possible leads, pointing out details in the pictures. Laura listened quietly, her heart pounding. She hoped they could find answers quickly and solve the mystery of the skeleton. After providing all the evidence, Laura felt a wave of relief. She had done everything she could. "Will this help?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. One officer nodded. "You've given us a lot to work with. We'll do our best to figure this out." Laura sighed, feeling lighter. She hoped this would lead to answers and bring some closure to the eerie discovery in the woods. The police assured Laura they would investigate thoroughly. "Stay available for further questions," one officer instructed. Laura nodded, feeling a mix of anxiety and hope. "Thank you," she said softly. As she left the station, she couldn't help but wonder what the investigation would uncover. She knew it wasn't over yet, but at least she had taken the first step towards finding the truth. A team of officers set out early the next morning, following Laura's directions to the hidden car. They moved methodically through the forest, their radios crackling with updates. "We're close," one officer said, scanning the area. The dense foliage made progress slow, but they were determined to find the vehicle. Every step brought them closer to uncovering the mystery hidden in the woods. The officers found the car quickly once they reached the described location. It was exactly as Laura had said, rusted and hidden by bushes. "Over here!" an officer called out. They began to perform tests and document everything, securing the area with yellow tape. The forest was eerily quiet as they worked, each of them feeling the weight of the discovery and what it might mean. The next day, Laura received a call from the police. "We've identified some evidence," the officer began. The car was unregistered and had traces of blood belonging to a missing person. Laura's heart raced. "Who?" she asked, barely above a whisper. "A woman named Emilia, missing for over a decade." Laura felt a chill run down her spine. The mystery deepened with every new piece of information. The police explained that Emilia had disappeared more than 10 years ago. "We're not sure if the skeleton is hers," the officer admitted. Laura listened, her mind spinning with questions. How did she end up here? She wondered aloud. The officer didn't have answers, only more questions. The discovery had reopened a cold case, and they were determined to find out what had happened to Emilia. The police were puzzled by who had moved the skeleton. "We're investigating all possibilities," they assured Laura. She nodded, feeling the tension rise again. The thought of someone tampering with the scene was unsettling. "Stay alert," they advised. Laura left the station, her mind heavy with the implications. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story, and it wasn't over yet. Laura tried to move on, thinking her part in the mystery was over. But soon, she started noticing strange things. A car parked outside her house, the same one every day. People she didn't recognize seemed to be watching her. Am I being paranoid? She wondered, but deep down, she knew something was off. The feeling of being followed was impossible to shake, making her uneasy. One night, Laura's phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Stay silent, or else," the message read. Her heart skipped a beat. Then the calls started. Breathing, silence, threats. "Who is this?" she shouted into the phone, but the caller hung up. Each message was more menacing than the last, warning her to keep quiet. Fear gripped her, and she realized she was in deeper than she had thought. Laura became too scared to go outside. The threats had made her paranoid, and she felt like a prisoner in her own home. Curtains drawn, doors locked, she lived in constant dread. Every noise made her jump. "I can't live like this," she whispered to herself, clutching her phone. The once comforting silence of her home now felt oppressive and threatening, keeping her on edge. Laura thought about going to the police with the threats, but hesitated. What if it makes things worse? She wondered. The fear of escalation kept her from acting. She replayed the officer's words in her mind, wondering if they could help. But the idea of facing more danger paralyzed her. Torn between seeking help and staying silent, Laura felt trapped, unable to decide what to do next. Laura's life turned into a nightmare. She was constantly looking over her shoulder, jumping at shadows. Paranoia and isolation consumed her days. Friends called, but she couldn't bring herself to explain. "I'm fine," she lied, avoiding their concern. Every day felt like a battle to stay sane. The mystery of the skeleton and the threatening messages loomed over her, making her feel utterly alone and terrified. Laura received a call from the police, their tone serious but resigned. "We've decided to call off the search," the officer said. "It looks like an animal might have moved the skeleton." Laura listened in disbelief. "An animal?" she repeated. "That's our best theory," the officer confirmed. Laura hung up, feeling a mix of frustration and disappointment. The answers she sought seemed further away than ever. Laura couldn't shake the feeling that the police were wrong. The explanation about an animal moving the skeleton didn't sit well with her, but without more evidence, she felt powerless to challenge their conclusion. What can I do? She wondered, pacing her living room. She needed to find another way to get to the bottom of this, but her options seemed limited and unclear. One day, as Laura sat lost in thought, there was a knock at her door. She hesitated, her heart racing. Opening the door slightly, she saw a man she didn't recognize. "Can I help you?" she asked cautiously. "I need to talk to you about the car in the woods," he replied. Laura's mind raced with possibilities. Was he connected to the mystery? She didn't know what to think. Terrified, Laura considered slamming the door shut. But the man seemed earnest, sensing her fear. "I'm not here to harm you," he assured. "I want to help." Laura's grip on the door loosened slightly. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I think we can help each other," he said softly. Laura's desperation for answers won over her fear, and she decided to hear him out. With a mix of fear and hope, Laura cautiously let the man in. "I'm desperate for any help," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, understanding her hesitation. "Let's sit down," he suggested gently. Laura led him to the living room, her mind racing with questions. She couldn't shake the feeling that this stranger might hold the key to unraveling the mystery. The man settled into the chair, looking around the room. "I'm Carl, a former ranger. I know these woods well," he began. Laura watched him, her curiosity piqued. "Why are you here?" she asked. Carl leaned forward, his expression serious. "I've heard about the car and the skeleton. I think there's more to this than what the police are saying." Laura felt a glimmer of hope spark inside her. "I don't buy the police's conclusion," Carl said bluntly. Laura nodded, feeling a sense of relief that she wasn't alone in her doubts. "You don't think it was an animal?" she asked. Carl shook his head. "No, I've seen enough in those woods to know when something doesn't add up." His conviction was clear, and it made Laura believe that together they might find the real answers. Carl began to tell Laura about Amelia, the missing woman connected to the car. "She vanished over a decade ago," he explained. "A tragic story. She was an experienced hiker, but something went horribly wrong." Laura listened intently, feeling a connection to Amelia's plight. "What happened to her?" she asked softly. Carl's eyes darkened. "That's what we need to find out. The truth is buried out there somewhere." "The police assumed Amelia died from a hiking injury," Carl continued. "But I think they missed something. They were too quick to close the case." Laura frowned. "You think there's more to it?" she asked. Carl nodded. "Absolutely. They overlooked key evidence, maybe even dismissed foul play." Laura felt a chill. The more Carl spoke, the more she realized how deep this mystery might go. Carl leaned closer, his voice low. "I believe Amelia was murdered," he said, "and the same person moved her skeleton." Laura's eyes widened. "Murdered? But who would do such a thing?" she asked, her mind racing. Carl sighed. "That's what we need to find out. But it's dangerous. Whoever did this might still be out there, watching." Laura shivered, understanding the gravity of their situation. Carl leaned back, choosing his words carefully. "There are details I can't share right now," he said softly. Laura frowned. "Why not?" she asked. Carl sighed. "It's for your safety. The less you know, the better, for now." Laura felt a pang of frustration, but also understood. "All right, I trust you," she said, realizing that Carl's caution was meant to protect her from further danger. After much thought, Laura decided to join Carl at his old cabin. "We need a plan," she said firmly. Carl nodded. "Agreed, my cabin is a good place to start." Packing a few essentials, Laura felt a mix of fear and determination. She knew this was risky, but she couldn't just sit back anymore. Together, they would figure out how to confront the killer and uncover the truth. At the cabin, Laura pulled out the map she had found. "Look at this," she said, unfolding it on the table. Carl's eyes widened as he examined it. "This is significant," he murmured, tracing the lines with his finger. "You recognize it?" Laura asked, hopeful. Carl nodded. "Yes, it shows old trails and landmarks. This could lead us to more clues." Laura felt a surge of hope. Carl proposed they use the map to track down more clues. "We can follow these trails and see where they lead," he suggested. Laura agreed, feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety. "Do you think we can find the murderer?" she asked. Carl's expression was serious. "It's possible. This map is our best chance." Together, they planned their next steps, determined to expose the truth. With their plan in place, Carl and Laura prepared for a risky journey deeper into the woods. They gathered supplies, making sure they had everything they needed. "We have to be ready for anything," Carl warned. Laura nodded, packing carefully. As they double-checked their gear, the reality of what they were about to do sank in. They were about to embark on a dangerous mission to uncover a deadly secret. Before dawn, Carl and Laura packed their supplies. The forest was still dark as they loaded their gear, the morning air crisp and cool. "Ready?" Carl asked, securing his backpack. Laura nodded, her heart pounding with anticipation and nerves. "Let's do this." They set out early, determined to follow the map's clues. The journey ahead was uncertain, but they were ready to face whatever they found. Using the map as their guide, Carl and Laura navigated through dense, uncharted parts of the forest. The terrain was rough, and the path was overgrown. But they pressed on. "This way," Carl pointed, leading Laura through the thick underbrush. They moved cautiously, aware that each step brought them closer to uncovering the truth. The forest seemed to close in around them, but they stayed focused on their goal. As they walked, Carl and Laura began to notice signs of recent activity: footprints in the dirt, broken branches, and even a discarded water bottle. "We're on the right path," Carl said, examining the evidence. Laura's heart raced. Someone's been here recently. The realization made their mission feel even more urgent. They quickened their pace, knowing they might be closer to the answers they sought. While navigating the forest, Carl shared more about the area's history. "This place has seen some dark times," he said, his voice somber. He told Laura about old legends and mysterious disappearances. People have always whispered about hidden dangers here. Laura listened, feeling the weight of the forest's secrets. The stories added another layer to their mission, making her even more determined to uncover the truth. Eventually, they reached a secluded spot marked on the map. There, hidden among the trees, was an old, abandoned cabin. "This must be it," Carl said, pointing to the weathered structure. Laura felt a chill. "It looks like it's been here forever," she whispered. They approached cautiously, the cabin's presence eerie and foreboding. Whatever lay inside, they were ready to face it together. Stepping inside the cabin, Carl and Laura immediately noticed signs of illegal activities. Papers were scattered on a makeshift table, and strange equipment lay in the corners. "Look at this," Carl whispered, picking up a document. Laura glanced around, feeling a chill. "This place was definitely used for something shady," she muttered. The eerie silence of the cabin hinted at secrets waiting to be uncovered. As they sifted through the clutter, Carl and Laura found documents linking the site to Amelia. "These papers mention her name," Carl said, holding up a faded letter. Laura's eyes widened. "This is the proof we need," she exclaimed. The documents detailed plans and movements, suggesting Amelia had been here. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together, pointing towards a larger, more sinister plot. Among the documents, they discovered old, faded photographs of Amelia and others in the forest. "These are from years ago," Laura said, examining a picture. "Amelia looks so young." Carl nodded. "These photos prove she was here." The images showed happy moments, now tainted by the grim reality of her disappearance. Each photo was a haunting reminder of the mystery they were unraveling. Carl stared at the photographs and documents, his mind racing. This cabin was a hideout, he concluded. The people responsible for Amelia's disappearance used this place. Laura shuddered, the weight of their discovery sinking in. "We need to find out who they are," she said, determined. Carl agreed, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. They were closer to the truth, but danger was still near. Suddenly, they heard footsteps outside. Carl and Laura froze, exchanging worried glances. "Someone's coming," Carl whispered urgently. They quickly scanned the room for a hiding place. The sound of approaching footsteps grew louder, and their hearts pounded in their chests. "We need to hide, now," Laura hissed. They slipped behind a large cabinet, holding their breath as the door creaked open. Carl and Laura quickly hid behind a large cabinet as two men entered the cabin. They peered through a crack, watching the men closely. "Keep quiet," Carl whispered. The men seemed familiar with the place, moving confidently through the clutter. "We need to be careful," Laura thought, her heart pounding. The tension was palpable as they waited, hoping not to be discovered in their hiding spot. From their hiding place, Carl and Laura overheard the men discussing plans. "We need to move it tonight," one of them said. "It's too risky to leave it here." The other nodded. "We'll take it to the bunker." Carl and Laura exchanged glances, realizing they were onto something important. The men's conversation hinted at more evidence nearby, making their mission even more crucial. As the men left the cabin, Carl and Laura silently followed, careful to keep their distance. They moved through the dense forest, tracking the men's footsteps. "Stay close," Carl whispered. Laura nodded, her senses on high alert. The men's path led them deeper into the woods, and they knew they had to gather as much information as possible without being seen. Carl and Laura watched as the men approached a hidden bunker. "What is this place?" Laura whispered. The men unlocked the door and disappeared inside. Carl gestured for Laura to stay low. "This is where we'll find more answers," he said. The bunker revealed more about the criminal operations they were uncovering. Laura's heart raced with both fear and determination. Carl took out his camera and began snapping photos of the bunker's exterior, while Laura noted down everything they observed. "We need to document all of this," Carl said quietly. They captured every detail, knowing this evidence would be crucial. "We're getting closer," Laura thought, feeling a mix of hope and dread. Their mission was dangerous, but they were committed to uncovering the truth. As Carl and Laura sifted through the documents and items in the bunker, they made a chilling discovery. Amelia had stumbled upon an illegal meth lab deep in the forest. "This explains why she was killed," Carl said, his voice heavy. Laura nodded, feeling a wave of sadness and anger. "They silenced her to protect their operation," she whispered, the gravity of their mission sinking in. Going through more evidence, Carl and Laura realized the same criminals had moved Amelia's skeleton to cover their tracks. They were trying to throw off anyone who might investigate, Carl explained. Laura clenched her fists. "We have to stop them," she said with determination. The pieces were finally coming together, revealing a web of deceit and danger that needed to be exposed. Armed with this new information, Carl and Laura decided to confront the authorities. "We need to show them what we've found," Carl insisted. Laura agreed. They have to believe us now." Together, they planned their approach, knowing they had solid evidence to back up their claims. The stakes were high, but they were ready to face the challenge and bring justice for Amelia. Carl and Laura knew exposing the meth lab and the criminals would be dangerous but necessary. "We have to do this, no matter the risk," Carl said firmly. Laura nodded, her resolve strengthening. For Amelia, she agreed, they prepared themselves for the potential dangers ahead, understanding that their actions could bring down a dangerous criminal operation and finally reveal the truth. Determined to seek justice for Amelia, Carl and Laura meticulously prepared their evidence for the police. They organized the photos, documents, and notes they had gathered, making sure everything was clear and undeniable. "This has to be foolproof," Laura said, double-checking their work. Carl nodded. "It will be." With everything ready, they steeled themselves for the next step in their journey toward justice. Carl and Laura returned to the police station, their hearts pounding. They laid out their findings in front of the officers. "We have proof," Carl said, spreading the photos and documents across the desk. The officers looked skeptical but intrigued. Laura added, "This is about Amelia's disappearance and an illegal meth lab." They watched as the police carefully examined the evidence, waiting for their reaction. At first, the police doubted Carl and Laura's story. "This seems far-fetched," an officer said, frowning. But as they went through the photos and documents, their skepticism began to fade. "These are some serious allegations," another officer remarked, flipping through the pictures. "And they're well documented," Carl insisted. Slowly, the officers started to nod, realizing the gravity of the situation. "We need to act on this," one concluded. The police quickly organized a raid to capture the criminals and uncover the meth lab. "We'll need a tactical team," the chief instructed. Carl and Laura watched as the officers moved into action, coordinating the details. This is it, Laura thought, feeling a mix of anxiety and hope. The plan was set, and they knew the next steps would be critical in bringing justice for Amelia. The raid was a success. The police stormed the bunker and arrested the criminals involved in the meth lab operation. "We've got them all," an officer reported back. Carl and Laura felt a wave of relief. "This is for Amelia," Laura whispered, tears in her eyes. The arrests brought closure to the long unsolved case, finally ending the reign of those responsible for her tragic fate. With the criminals behind bars, Laura felt a deep sense of relief. She knew she had done the right thing by seeking the truth. "We did it," she said to Carl, a smile breaking through her exhaustion. Carl nodded, proud of their perseverance. The journey had been long and perilous, but it was worth it. Amelia's story was finally heard, and justice had been served. Do you like this touching and surprising story? If so, we invite you to leave us a comment expressing your opinion. If you want to continue enjoying inspiring stories like this one, subscribe to our channel or check out the other videos shown at the bottom of the screen. Thank you for your cooperation.